I'd done a video recently on the UKIP leader Nick Tanconi, and I had quite a few responses to that. And there was an extremely interesting comment on that video, and essentially what I'd positioned in that video was that it was not right to vote for UKIP because Nick Tanconi was never going to get anywhere near power. And somebody wrote in the comments section, in order to get near power in a corrupted system, you must agree to be corrupt. Now, I thought that was an excellent argument because it's true. Now, we all know, or we all have heard, that power corrupts. So, somebody gets into power, they feel the flush of power and everything that comes with that, and then they start acting like the god of the land or whatever it is. And so absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the saying goes. But that is an argument about corruption and about realizing the non-perfection of existence. And so as human beings, we are imperfect. And the systems that we create are also imperfect. Added to that, we are human beings as well. And so given that we're humans, and given that we're ultra competitive, and given that's one of the reasons why we've become the apex predator on the planet, and we currently rule planet Earth, for the moment anyway. I'm not sure whether there'll be, some type of intelligent lizard come out of the undergrowth at some point, but regardless of anything else, we are the apex predator. We are the most intellectual creatures on this planet, and that's why we run the planet. But we are imperfect, and our systems are imperfect, and the reason why we're here, just to reiterate that, is because we're competitive. Now, that human competitiveness drives us on. It drives us to invent things. It drives us to create art. Drives us to acquire resources for ourselves and our family. It drives us on to have better lives. There's a lot of reasons why competitiveness is healthy in a society. It has served us well up until this moment. However, when you add all of these things together, human beings, highly competitive environments, huge reward as well, and that reward in the modern day is financial reward. We live in a financial based system, and so our system isn't based on goodwill. It's not based on, anything apart from money. Money makes the world go round because that's our exchange unit. And because of that, when you put money involved, human beings, imperfect systems, and then you add in fame and glory and ego into that, this is a very, very heady mix that politicians have to deal with. And the phrase, in order to get near power in a corrupted system, you must agree to be corrupt, made me think of all this. And what are, in essence, the systems within that? What are the main structure points of power in a corrupted system? Okay, so the first thing to understand about power in any system is that there are gatekeepers to power. Now, these gatekeepers exist in order to maintain power. And in order to rise within that power, you have to prove your worth to the group. And so they're not just going to let you in just because you turn up and go, oh, hiya, I'm here, I'm well up for this. That's not going to be enough for them. And they're also not going to be too concerned if you want to play by the rules. The rules, when you get higher up into power, start to blur, as does ethics and morality. So the closer you rise to the top, the more you have to kill. And so the saying goes. And if you've ever seen any, Roman film, you understand that only the most ruthless get to the top, because you have to be ruthless. You have to be willing to step over the top of people. And here's a good example. The Miliband's running for the Labour leadership. A few years ago, there was a Labour leadership, and they were both brothers. And I hadn't seen that before. And I gather that Ed came in later after David, so they were both running at the same time. And of course, Ed did whatever is necessary to win. He was the one that ascended. And why was he the one that ascended? Because he wanted it more. It's as simple as that. And he was willing to go that little bit farther. He was willing to bleed a little bit more. He was willing to sacrifice a little bit more. He was willing to push the boundaries a little bit more. And that's why he got to power, because he was ruthless enough to take it. And that's what you have to do with power. You have to take power. Power isn't given, power is taken. And all the centuries floating by in the modern day, and everyone with unicorns and rainbows and kumbaya, doesn't change a thing. We are human beings at heart. We are gladiatorial in nature. And we are, as we get to the top, become fearless in our pursuit of power. And this really means that the people that ascend to power deserve to be in power in some way. Because we don't have weak people in power. We can look at Keir Starmer and say, oh, look at him, he's this, he's that, or whatever it is. But make no mistake, Keir Starmer is ruthless. He may look as you perceive him to be, but in order to become the leader of a political party, you've got to have something about you. You've got to be able to take the fight somewhere. I mean, there are some instances where people just get landed in a job. For instance, Kamala Harris. You know, she was at the apex of so much circumstantial stuff going on. She was basically a body in the right place at the right time, and she nearly became president without virtually any skill whatsoever. She was completely wrong for the job. She was actually hidden away for 2 years when she became vice president almost, because they were too embarrassed to wheel her out. And sometimes that does happen, but as the American system proved, who won the election? Trump won the election. Why did Trump win the election? Because he was ruthless, and Trump understands power. And power resides with those who take it. And also resides within the masses, and I'll come to that. But in terms of, the gatekeepers there, these are the institutions. So the institutions are the gatekeepers, and who are they? Well, they're everyone in power. So that would be political power, the power in the police, the power in the education system, all of these different systems of power, these authorities within our life, financial institutions, they hold most of the power. And so there are a bunch of gatekeepers here with entrenched political interests. So you've got corporate donors, for instance. So people that give a lot of money to political parties, and they're gonna expect their pound of flesh, which is why Rupert Murdoch had cosy little suppers with David Cameron in Number 10. These huge political donors, they get something for their money. Otherwise, why donate? They don't do it out of the goodness of their heart. These are the people who are ruthless enough to rise to their own levels in their own corporations. You know, one of the things that's often missed when we're looking at CEOs and the money they make. Yeah, they're probably paid too much money, whatever. But in the corporate world, it's even more ruthless. If you've ever worked for a large corporation, you'll know the things that people do to get ahead. I mean, you've got type A personalities, highly intelligent, highly driven, highly motivated, don't care about personal life, not interested in families, not interested in going out with the boys and drinking and all of that. They have one thing in mind. They are going to rise and climb that greasy pole no matter what. And what happens? Those people rise through the organisations. More often than not, they do have sociopathic tendencies. You could say that, but regardless of anything else, these type A personalities, they go out and kill things. Just like we used to do on the savannah. Those are the same people. The same people that used to go out and hunt and come back with an animal carcass. Those are those people. They still exist in society. They've just found another way to vent themselves, to insert themselves into the hierarchy. And so these people, these type A personalities, they are ruthless. And they will step over the top of you at a moment's notice. They will abandon friendships in an organisation that they've had for years at a moment's notice if it gives them leverage. And that's why those people are there. And that's why Keir Starmer's there. That's why Kemi Badenoch's there. That's why Nigel Farage is there. And that's why the rest of them are there. Because they're the ones that are willing to do what it takes to take power. So, in terms of the gatekeeping, the gatekeepers to the system see these people and they say, yes, you may ascend, you may rise, you've conformed to what we require. You're rough enough, you're tough enough, you're ruthless enough to do this, and so we will ascend you. And so the system looks after itself. It only promotes people ruthless enough to maintain the system with which everybody's grew accustomed, who is within the system of hierarchy, the top of the hierarchy. Now, compromise. What is a compromise? Will a politician make a compromise? Yes. Yes, people in power and those ruthless enough to maintain power always make compromises. They always will do whatever it takes to get the best out of a situation. So if you take a politician will make small compromises to gain influence every second of every day, all the time. Now, these compromises, though, they do snowball. So a clever politician knows that if you use compromise too much, then you trade compromise for power. And then you become part of the machine. And this is why people start to become corrupted. And so a politician may want to get into politics for a reason. So let's say, and I'm just picking this, I don't believe in net zero, but let's say you did. Let's say you had a dream and you woke up one night in a cold sweat and you thought, I know what it is. I must, no matter what, get into politics because I want to bring this net zero agenda to the fore. And it's the most important thing for mankind. And I must do this. So what do? You go and you try to get into the hierarchy of the system and it just locks you out. You must make a compromise. And whatever that is to gain influence. So you'll say something in Parliament over here to help that person over there. You'll go and cut this over there, this ribbon over there, in order to gain influence over here. You'll visit this group of people over there. You'll compromise yourself to the point of compromising yourself all the time because you have that vision. And in some ways, that's strong. Because you know and you've worked out and you're acting in a pragmatic way. Because you're thinking to yourself, the only thing that matters here is my agenda. And I'll do whatever it takes to get to my agenda. And in the course of that, we make compromises. And that's just how it is. One of the things that people don't generally understand about success is this. Success is a little bit like a supermarket trolley. And I know that sounds strange, but here it is. So let's say I've got a shopping basket and it's full of some really cool things for my life. So let's say the first thing I put on the checkout is a successful business that makes money. So everyone might want that. So you'd say, oh, I want that. So you put it on the checkout there and it goes through and it gets scanned. And guess what? There's a price that has to be paid for that. You don't just get to have a successful business with loads of money. You have to pay the price to have what you want. And just in the same way with anything in life, you can say, I want to be an Olympian. Then you've got to pay the price to be that person. And you have to pay a price in anything. Even to get modestly or mildly good at anything, you have to pay a price. And so within getting what you want, there is always a compromise. And what happens? These compromises snowball. And before long, what politicians often find, and people in power often find, that they've already traded their principles for power. And what they've done is they've become part of the machine that they started out to fight. And in trying to assimilate the machine and trying to beat the machine assimilates them. These are the powers that exist. But then again, if the power wasn't there, if the system of hierarchy wasn't there, what would happen? You know, there's a few quotes that say, human beings, we're animals. That's all we are. And we're one step away from anarchy. You know, the famous story of the Roman senator walking round Rome. And he said, I think all of the important people in the senators should wear a sash to mark them out. And he was told in no uncertain terms, well, we can't do that because then everyone will know exactly how many slaves there are and they'll realise that they're the ones that have power, not us. This is just a fact of life. Now, generally, there are two types of politicians that you will see. So there's a career politician, which we see, I would say 90%. I'm just grasping at a percentage there. You might disagree with that. And there's also the reformers. And so if you look at the reformers, and it's strange that that word reformer should come in, and I am going to use the concept, although a lot of people don't like Nigel Farage, we'll use Nigel Farage, who got into politics for a reason. You could use Rupert Lowe, who got into politics for a reason. And these type of reformer characters are necessary within the system because what they do is they bring in outside of ideas into the system and they present these ideas to the system, and what the system does is it'll reject them. Or in a small amount of cases, it'll accept the idea if the system likes it and it's good for the system. And so let's look at Rupert Lowe. So what ideas, what reform did Rupert Lowe want? Well, Rupert Lowe walks in to the systems of power and says, I know, we should start some mass deportations around these parts. That's what we need to be happening right now. And what does the system do? The system doesn't like being questioned. And so the system crushes him. It's relatively straightforward. The system cannot have reformers coming in and just changing the system. These are slow-moving things. They're a giant, slow-turning stone wheel that moves inexorably forward, but very, very slowly as well. And so when reformers come into any system, they're generally crushed or ejected. You may have experienced this yourself. You may have went into a business and immediately upon there, you'll work there for a few months and then you'll notice a glaring error. So you'll say, why do we even need that over there? Or why aren't we doing this? And generally speaking, in most work environments, you'll be crucified for that. The bosses will go, no, we've already thought of that. Nope. And then if you keep mentioning it, you'll probably find your way out the door. And that's normally what happens. Whereas, and you may have noticed this as well, the people that go into a business and blindly accept everything that's on offer, so they'll just literally close their eyes, put their fingers in the ears and go, la, 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 la. Well, they get to rise, don't they? You must have seen this before. Quiet people who never say anything bad about the business. And then you add a few years, add a few more years, and all of a sudden, they've been promoted. Because the system needs the hierarchy to stay in place. It needs the solid, rigid system that has kept the system running for a long time. And in many ways, you're trying to reform the business that you're in. The business doesn't need reforming. It already existed before the reformer came along. And so, really, reformers are very, very apt to failure. They normally fail. It took Nigel Farage 30 years of battering on about Brexit before anything happened. Well, 20 years now, 30. And this is what's required. If you're going to be a reformer in the system, you not only have to be tough, but you have to be a wolf in your own respect and able to put up with the slings and arrows that come with that. So when we're looking at politicians as well, we have to understand that most of them are career politicians. And so when we're trying to enact change into the system, as the question was, in order to get near power in a corrupted system, you must agree to be corrupt. Yes, that's correct. But unless you agree and compromise to gain access into the system's going to continue to do what it wants, and you will die on that hill, quite literally. You can spend the rest of your life, and here's an example that I'm going to use. I'm going to use the mass deportation argument that was presented in my UKIP video. Power protects itself. Institutions of all types of power, whether political or other types like corporate, even cultural power, there's only one thing it wants. There's only one goal that it wants, and that is it wants to survive. It wants to continue on. And anyone trying to change them, change the thing, change what it is, they become a threat. And so to get close to power, to enact change, you must stop being a threat. You must become, in one way, safe. And so there are two ways that you can look at this. Let's say I don't want mass migration. How do I get that? What's important to me? Is it important to me to stand on a hill somewhere with a group of my buddies all whinging for the rest of my life about the fact that I hate mass migration? Is that what I should do? Should I spend the rest of my days whining and moaning about the same issue over and over and over, and there never being a change? Is that what I should do? Or should I use my intellectual capacity, use my strength, use my own ruthlessness in order to attack the system? And how do you attack the system? You do the thing that the system doesn't want you to do. The system, when I'm looking at these quotes here about this thing, oh, you're weak, you're this, you're that, I understand that. I understand why people say it. It's because they've been oppressed for so long that they don't know what else to say. They're quite happy to stay in their little echo chambers. And as I've said before, same as on the left, on the very right wing, and I've been in those places on X, and I've had debates, if you can call them debates, with far-right people trying to understand the rationale, and failing, I might add, utterly failing. And I walked away from that with a sense of loss, because I believed those people to be lost. I will not compromise everything. I will not compromise at ethno-nationalism. I'm a nationalist. I believe in the nation state. That's got nothing to do with race. But no, I will not compromise at ethno-nationalism. There has to be a core. I will not compromise at socialism. On the other end, communism, Trotskyism, Leninism, whatever you want to call it, those are the two ends of the spectrum that are excluded from the argument. Not only because it's a bad way to live your life and an angry way to live your life, and it is an angry, angry way to live your life, but also because it's to be rejected ethically, morally. That's not what we were meant to be doing. We are all living under this sun. We are all men and women here. And so to reject somebody based upon a skin colour, nationality, is silly. It's a weakness of character. It's a misunderstanding of the humanity that we should all share. We are all nodes in a network. We are humans, and we can't exclude people based upon any type of cultural bias. Now, we can say, you've come to our country and you're trying to enact a caliphate in our country. And that could be argued, yes, that's not on. No, but that's because that's a threat to our system of power. This is our system. And we are acting in the same way that power acts on us. We have our own system. And we have reformers coming into our system right now. And they're landing here illegally and legally. And what they're doing is they're reforming our system. And we are the gatekeepers of our system in that respect. And so, to finish up, because this has been going on for a while, in order to enact change, You have to be willing to stare at yourself. You have to be into your soul. You have to be willing to stare into the abyss and look at yourself and say, what's important to me? Well, that's important to me. What's important to me? To maintain the structure, the culture of my society that I was born in, the country that I love, which is England. I want to maintain that. I don't want that system ripped apart, whether it be from communist socialists, whether it be people, on the far right of politics, whether it be from aggressive multi-faiths coming into our country. It doesn't matter to me. I want it stopped. And how do you do that? Well, you make a compromise with your own belief system, because ultimately it's always a compromise. Think about this. If you were to take a piece of paper and write on that piece of paper every policy that you would have in the country, it would be 100%, 100% different from everybody else's. So we're already making a compromise. If I was to look at the world and design it like God, what would it be like? I don't know, I haven't thought about it that much, but it would certainly be in my image. And so, right at the start, we're making some sort of compromises. It's just the level or the spectrum of compromise that we're willing to go to. How far are we willing to go to get what we want? And for me, voting ideologically allows the system to freeze me out. The system wants me to behave like this. The system wants the right wing of politics to be disseminated, to be atomized. It loves that. It knows that people are busy arguing in echo chambers. You've got to come out of the echo chamber and at some point compromise and say, I must at some point stop what's happening. What's the best way to do that? And you have to answer your own question. I've provided an answer for that in the UKIP video I made. I've provided my answer because I've already thought about it. I'm quite happy to compromise my political beliefs. Yes. In order to get what I want. Yes. Because the system just doesn't, it'll just reject everything. It'll reject all that I have. And again, that's part of why I do a YouTube channel. Because I'm concerned about the state of the country. But, the question, in order to get near power in a corrupted system, you must agree to be corrupt. Yes, I'm afraid so, but I'm willing to do what's necessary to stop the rot. The question is, are you? Thanks very much for your time.